gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time to put it all on the line. Ooh, yeah. Time to put it all on the line. Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Rumber Pod. It's your boy Spencer here with my good friend Ryan. We are back. We are back with another divisional breakdown to bring you. Today, we will be kicking off one of the more fun divisions to think about and talk about in the league right now. We are going with the first team in the NFC. We're going in the NFC North today. Fun division, a lot of interesting things going on, a lot of new blood in this division. A lot of new talent, and a lot of big plays going on here. I'm excited to get into it. Ryan, how are you feeling today?
Oh, I'm feeling pretty good, you know. As a Saints fan, I have a lot of personal bad blood with one particular team here. But, you know, otherwise, it's going to be exciting. It'll be fun. I think we've got some really interesting off seasons to talk about here, and definitely a lot of teams that have a lot to look forward to in the future. And as far as, you know, active off seasons, I think this is probably the most, is it the most active off season? Perhaps. There's a lot of new faces, a lot of new looks, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of activity here. You got young teams building toward the future. Majority of these teams, you could say. A few teams we would perceive as the top dogs, so to speak. But truth be told, I don't know about your perspective, I could see this division going a multitude of ways just because of all the factors we have with development, inclusion of new talent, things along the lines. But that being said, let's go ahead and start off here with the Minnesota Vikings. This is one of the teams that comes to mind for me when I talk about fun teams to watch in the NFL. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is the first thing we have to mention when we think of the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, you say Vikings, you think Jefferson these days. He's been absolutely electric, the best wide receiver in the NFL since entering. There's been a lot said about Devontae Adams. To me, it was just Jefferson in waiting. We needed to see one more season, and that's exactly what we got last year. It goes without saying that him bringing what he brings has completely turned around the fortunes of the Vikings. It's turned around the storyline that we kind of had regarding this squad and what our expectations were. Just tell me a little bit about the Vikings offense. What stood out to you when you first looked?
Yeah, you know, this is, I just want to say, you know, getting it started here, talking about Justin Jefferson, it is crazy the amount that he's been producing like this. And one thing that I want to take note of here is that he is producing like this on his rookie deal. You know, especially as we have the wide receiver market looking to be reset soon, you know, with the likes of Jamar Chase and company and, you know, the Jamar Chases of the world in general. You know, some of those receivers are going to be looking at getting $30 million a year. I would say, on those contract extensions, and the fact that you've got a guy like this coming into the league producing like this on the cheap, it really gives you the opportunity to win a lot of football games. How they've managed to do it is a bit interesting. We'll get into that. But yeah, just in general, Justin Jefferson, I mean, if he has, you know, even 75 to 80% of the season that he's had in his first 2 years, I don't think the race is even close anymore that he's going to be the best receiver in the NFL, just in terms of hands and his route running ability. I mean, I've seen so many replays of him saucing our boy Lattimore down there in the red zone. Yeah, and that's just my take in general, is having him come in and producing like this on his rookie deal is marvelous for his future, because obviously he's going to get paid like he deserves to get paid. And it means the world for the Vikings, saving that $30 million in cap. And I want to give this a little bit in conjunction to the Kirk Cousins contract. He is entering the final year of his deal. I don't know if how much you remember of that arms race for Kirk Cousins in that offseason where he was a free agent coming out of Washington. But it was the big story of the offseason, and he came in and he signed what was at the time a completely market resetting deal. And, I remember Denver being in contention to grab him. I wonder what that team would look like now if they managed to land him. But, Kirk coming in to the 2023 season on the last year of his contract and just taking into account what they've been able to get out of their rookie contracts. One thing I kind of wanted to start off with here is, they have a fairly easy strength of schedule in 2023. And, I'm just thinking if they're looking toward the future, they had that first round pick 24. There's a lot of people I hear saying, criticizing that they didn't take Levis right there at 24. You have Kirk in the final year of his contract. I do think that this team will have a bit of a regression, but even if we're regressing to the mean, they're still likely a playoff team, which means that they're not looking at a potential top 5 pick. So otherwise, they're going to have to look again to free agency and pony up some money, or they're going to have to give Kirk, a 1-year deal if he's interested in doing that. I'm just interested to see what's going to happen here. Kirk has had, his fair amount of criticism levied his way. But if they want to really move on from him and make use of the pieces like Justin Jefferson while he's still on the rookie deal and continue to get better and improve as an offense, I'm just curious, why not take Levis if he's there at 24? They're going to have to give up significant capital if they want to move up to get one now, or they'll have to hope that a quarterback falls into their lap. That's not unheard of. I expect, that they'll give Kirk a 1-year extension at the end of this season, which raises the question do they have a window, Super Bowl window? They've been pretty competitive and been a playoff team, went 13-4 last season. If they had a window, are they out of it now? Can Kirk take the leap that he needs to take to give them a deep playoff run, or not? This is the best wide receiver room he's ever had. They have a good pass catching tight end in Hawkinson. Now that he's motivated to get a big contract in his final year, that is if he stops selling, which is what kind of leap is Kirk going to be able to make, or is he going to regress? I'm just curious your thoughts on the whole situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, this is a new sort of brigade kind of leading the way for Minnesota in terms of the staff. Kevin O'Connell came in, made a pretty strong impact on the players, sort of reset a culture that had somewhat become stagnant, I would say, with Mike Zimmer at the helm. As much success as they had under Mike Zimmer, this felt to me like a team that always had a pretty fair amount of discord amongst the players and a lack of assuredness in the direction of the franchise under that leadership. And that was really what stood out to me with Cousins is, for me personally, Cousins, I feel, is so hyper scrutinized because of what you're saying, that market setting deal that he received after leaving Washington. But that being said, Cousins has also been one of the most consistent producers at the position since getting within the scheme here, and led by Kevin O'Connell, or O'Connor, sorry. Wait, is it O'Connell or O'Connor? I'm sorry.
It's O'Connell.
O'Connell, thank you. Under his leadership, Cousins seemed to take a step forward, and you saw a level of aggression out of Cousins that we didn't see in the past. I think the most talked about play of all of last year, arguably, was that insane one-handed catch from Justin Jefferson on the Bills. And it actually speaks to a broader point about the Vikings team from last year, was how many one-score games they got into and managed to come away with those victories, the Bills game being one of them. For me personally, I felt the throw and the decision to get the ball to Jefferson in that situation and be aggressive in a game-clinching scenario like it was not the Kirk Cousins of old. I think the Kirk Cousins of old would have opted to take some kind of check down in that situation, or just not be aggressive in trying to move the sticks in a game-clinching scenario. And that's really just a microcosm of what has changed with the perception of Cousins within the locker room to me. I think that he's taken the step forward, and the players have kind of rallied around Cousins. I mean, it's obvious. We see it with the Kirko chains phenomenon that was
Iced
all
out
throughout
Kirk
last year. Yeah. It seems to me that the discord from the Zimmer era has faded away somewhat, and I think the team is behind Cousins, and I think the reason that you didn't see Minnesota get aggressive and go try to grab a Levis was for that exact reason. I think that he had his chance last year to prove to Kevin O'Connell that he can be the guy, and I think that Kevin O'Connell has given him the confidence to move on with him at the helm. And me personally, I wouldn't be surprised if you see a long-term extension for Kirk Cousins. I'm going to have to disagree with you on a one-year deal. I think they're willing to let him play out this year, see how far they go, and then give him the money afterwards on a somewhat long-term contract, especially considering that Cousins has established himself as not in that upper echelon of quarterbacks, and it very well may be a relatively team-friendly deal you may see him receive. I think it could be very similar to the Geno Smith deal that was just given to him, in terms of he's going to bet on himself. He knows any team he goes to, he's likely not going to have the kind of talent that surrounds him, like you're saying, on this Minnesota roster. We're talking about the decision to add Jordan Addison out of USC, one of the most explosive, electric college prospects of this draft, period, as a pure receiver. I know there are size concerns, but this guy can hold his own on the outside. He's proven that, and he is the perfect complement to what Jefferson brings you in terms of Jefferson's going to be open on a majority of the plays where he's thrown to, but Addison is the type of guy where you can go to him on plays where you're not even sure he's open necessarily. I think he's open when he isn't open type of player. Is he a jump ball guy? Not necessarily, but he's very savvy, and you can run him on comebacks. You can count on him to outmaneuver guys downfield on deep ball attempts like we're talking about, and that combined with the massive success that was the Hawkinson trade from last season. I think this is a very, very dangerous offense we're looking at, and to me, even the loss of Dalvin Cook doesn't do much to change my perception of this offense, because at the end of the day, I think Addison is going to be an excellent running mate. It's funny, I was watching back our AFC North episode that just came out officially as the time of recording this, but you had said that you could see Zay Flowers settling into offensive rookie of the year role and potentially having that level of production. I think I could see that out of Jordan Addison within this offense, just considering we know the looks that he's going to get one-on-one with the number 2 corner on the field on every turn. They're going to have to double Jefferson. They're going to have to cheat the safety his way every play. So that, combined with the fact that we know Hawkinson is a terror in the red zone, he's going to eat on the underneath intermediate game, I think it sets up a very healthy environment for Addison to come in and utilize his skill set, not overextend himself, play beyond his capability, but just lean into his strengths. And if what I think will happen does happen, I think that Kirk Cousins, with his new aggressive mentality that he carries, could really utilize a guy like Addison and unlock this offense for all purposes, essentially.
Yeah, I do see your point. Yeah, that to me, this is easily the best wide receiver room that he's ever had. And having the addition of Hawkinson as well, I mean, they clearly are a team that is investing in the fact that Kirk Cousins, they feel, can get it done, and he has shown that he can lead a winning football team and get them into the playoffs. It just becomes a matter of getting the deep playoff run that they need to give themselves a shot. I'm interested here on your take on this. I am also high on Jordan Addison coming in year one, but he is a rookie, still an unproven talent, but his upside is unfathomable, especially like you said, his ability to stretch the field and win contested catches. We know what he was able to do at USC. And to me also, I feel like one area of this wide receiver room that not nearly enough people are talking about is KJ Osborne. He got 90 targets in 2022 and looked like he can be the guy to step up and maybe become the number 2 to Jefferson. With Thielen gone and KJ Osborne getting a high volume of targets already, I suspect that he's going to take a leap in 2023 and is going to emerge as that true number 2 to Justin Jefferson. And if Addison works out like people expect, like you're saying, where he can come in and be a day one contributor and starter, potentially offensive rookie of the year status, this wide receiver room has the potential to rival the Bengals if the Addison pick ends up hitting.
Exactly, and Osborne has been an overlooked factor in the team. He's gotten better every single year he's played.
Yep.
At the end of the day, I don't expect him to slot into the number 2 role in the offense. We may have to agree to disagree on that. More so, not really any slight to his ability, but more so just how highly I think of Jordan Addison. I think Jordan Addison is a pure, obvious fit to just slot right in across from Jefferson. And at the end of the day, Osborne's skill set, I would even argue, is a little more suited to the interior anyway. I don't think he has any problem bouncing in and out. And considering, like we're saying, the size limitations that Addison's game does have, maybe that's a scenario where those guys are interchangeable between the slot and the outside spot. If you got a little bit bigger body type of corner going on the boundary, you could maybe slide Osborne over there with just a little bit more pro experience, a little bit better idea of how to get out of press scenarios like that. But at the end of the day, we know the slot, you're not going to see nearly as much press coverage. And with the speed that Osborne and our friend Addison bring, it's going to certainly unlock capability for that creative sort of Rams style offensive scheme to start to shine through a little bit more. Last year, I felt it was very much the Jefferson show every week, and it was like, can Jefferson get it done for us? Okay, and then maybe Hawkinson will catch a touchdown. And not to slight Osborne, but I just feel he's a little more suited for the 3 role. And now that they have a legit running mate for Jefferson and Addison, he should outperform what Thielen gave you last year. I think we all agree.
Absolutely.
Thielen was a bit of a fading talent at this point. Still a savvy guy, still a capable guy, sure, but the speed was not there. And it made it very difficult for him to play on the outside reliably, and you saw that. But just to go a little more, I had mentioned earlier the one-score games. I wanted to explore this. The Vikings were able to secure 4 one-score game victories last season. And the thing that stood out to me more than anything about these victories was who they were against. They secured one-score victories against Arizona in Week 8, the Commanders in Week 9, the Bills, as we discussed, in Week 10, and the Patriots in Week 12. 3 of those 4 teams had no business being on the field with Minnesota in these games, which points to a broader potential issue for this squad, and I'm hoping that gets resolved with a much higher level of offensive firepower, is that they need to be able to pull away from these teams in these type of games. You shouldn't have ever been in a situation or scenario where you needed to win at the skin of your teeth like that against teams. I mean, these are some of the bottom level teams in the league as of last season. The Commanders are underrated roster certainly, but they don't have the offensive skill to kind of play with a lot of squads like Minnesota fields. The Patriots were a mess all season offensively, and they somehow eked out 26 points. And this is a broader point of maybe about the defense, which we'll get into. But at the end of the day, maybe if you have other options to go to, you're not in these situations where you've got to play it close with these type of teams. Maybe you blow them out of the water.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one thing that contributed to the idea heading into the postseason when they were going to play the Giants, that everybody had this idea that, actually we're going to take the Giants. I feel like that was kind of the popular take, was to say that the Vikings are a little bit fool's gold here. I mean, you look at the record at 13-4, and obviously they have, good talent, good personnel, and with Kevin O'Connell coming in, Kirk was playing, really good football. But those close games against, especially teams like the Commanders and the Cardinals, like you're saying, it really, I think, was the tip that people had to say, like, you know what, I feel like it's going to be yet another first round exit here for the Vikings, and people ended up being right. and they ended up losing to the Giants.
Right, and what exactly are the keys to becoming that offensive juggernaut that we hope they can become, and hopefully transcend them into that upper echelon of a potential Super Bowl window, like you're saying? I think the first thing we have to mention is we clearly both believe they have the receiving talent to do that, but is the protection going to be where it needs to be for Cousins to continue to be aggressive in the way we're talking about? Well, at the end of the day, if you want to convert more deep balls, you're going to need to protect Cousins better. He's not going to be able to shift and make defenders miss. You need to keep a clean pocket for this guy. And they're going to obviously be returning Darisaw, who's the monstrous terror on that left side. Love Darisaw as a prospect. Very interested to see if he can take, I think this would be his third year. You often see these tackles take that jump their third season. So that will be really interesting to see. And we know his level of talent. Even if I were wrong, second year, maybe he could even break out as well in that same regard. But I do find it a little head-scratching, some of the decisions made to kind of keep this offensive line together. I know that cohesiveness and continued playing together can be a big factor for lines, but at the end of the day, I can't help but feel a little concerned about the interior line. This has been a long-term issue for this team. Never had high-level guard play, just sort of a saloon door at the inside lineman spot. Ezra Cleveland.
You hit it on the head. I mean, I had the exact same concerns. There are no changes to that starting five on the O-line, and that to me is a weaker point. They had no problem running the ball, but I feel like I'm leaning toward the side that may be due to the talent of Dalvin Cook rather than the play of the O-line. Because you're right, Cousins was sacked. He was sacked 46 times. That was the third most in the NFL. Behind Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. That interior O-line is just a consistent weakness, when you have guard Eddie Ingram and Bradbury there at center. Still, they had no problem scoring points. They were top 10 in the league for points for. But maybe that is also another contributing factor to like that idea that the Vikings last year were a little bit of fool's gold, right? Because they had a lot of problems when they were playing deep into the season, and especially in that playoff game against the Giants with keeping Kirk protected. I couldn't
this is
agree
always
more.
what you see deep down in these deep runs into the playoffs and the postseason. That the teams that stand out and the teams that make it the distance are the teams that are strong within the trenches. And Bradbury is one of the, if you could call it a bright spot, he's the bright spot. But the guard spot with Ed Ingram and Ezra Cleveland, I mean, this is, maybe I'm a complete casual and I have no idea about these guys' ability, but that's not doing much for me in terms of giving you some oomph. And it is concerning because I like Alexander Madison as a player, but the jury's still out on whether he has a three-down skill set as a full-time starter. It's probably not a strong player profile comparison, but I still think it rings true that you see with the Cowboys, Tony Pollard attempting to take control of that three-down role. It became really difficult for him in terms of just his ability to stay on the field, and his endurance was not enough to, not every player can handle that role. Not every player can play all three downs and hardly ever come out of the game. And Madison's a different build and a different kind of beast entirely. And I like Madison a lot, his skill set. But
Me too.
It begs the question, do they have enough in this backfield to kind of make up for Dalvin's loss if you're not getting stronger line play to go along with it? There's a lot you can say about Dalvin's injury history and the state of his shoulder and all these things, but I'll tell you what, your shoulder probably looks a lot healthier if you're not bashing into the D-line every single run between
100%.
the gaps. And at the end of the day, I just think there was so few runs where you saw them even keep Dalvin clean on any runs for the early portion. I mean, it felt like he had to scratch and claw, and Madison too had to scratch and claw for every single yard between the gaps. It helps that this scheme is an outside zone run scheme, and that's something they kind of hang their hat on to some degree. But you're not any stronger at the edge spot either. Brian O'Neill's not really going to take you over the top in that regard either. It feels to me almost like you got Darisaw, Bradbury, and just everybody else here. So it's it's a high level of concern, and I think it does cap my perspective on just how far they can go with this, even as high as I am on Addison and maybe another year for Osborne in the offense. Where do you stand with the line? Does that hold them back to a large degree?
I think so. And, all of these things are connected, right? We were talking a little bit earlier about, Cousins. This is his final year of his contract, and, Justin Jefferson, he's going to get paid. And, I think Dalvin Cook made that line look a lot better than it did, and it still didn't look great. But he was able to, put together yet another over 1,000-yard season. But, he is, now that he's been released, and he wanted upwards of $15 million a year. And I think that, I'm pretty confident that Madison will be able to come in and run the ball effectively. I also, liken it to that Zeke and Pollard situation, right? Like when Dalvin or Zeke were off the field and you had those backup guys coming in and they're hungry for, game time and they want to be out on the field and show what they can do. Maybe they perform at a higher level than they're expecting, and they're thinking, well, God, what's the point of keeping Dalvin on the cap if we can release him and get a similar level of play? But I think I want to preface this by saying I think that Dalvin Cook, since entering the league, has been a top talent at the running back position, and when he finds a home, he is going to produce. But he does want a pretty hefty contract, and he will be a big number on the cap of whoever picks him up. And, when you have like all of these other position groups that are talented, and if you do want to bring Kirk back, that's something, to consider. I think that Madison is going to struggle a lot more with that line play than Dalvin Cook did. And even then, I think, it's just going to be a major concern just in general, if you have your interior defensive line, if it gets penetrated and there's bodies in the backfield, it doesn't matter if you're Barry Sanders, you're going to have a hard time getting any mileage out of an offensive line like that, especially deep into the season.
Well, and it's fascinating because very, very rarely do you ever see a seventh round pick being such a pivotal swing player at a position of need for a team. Normally teams plan a little better than this in terms of their depth, but the good thing, and the thing I'll vouch for personally, is that they were able to secure DeWayne McBride in the 7th round. DeWayne McBride was a back that I was super high on. I felt that he was one of those late round flyer guys that are going to go under the radar and eventually become very fantasy relevant down the road for the fantasy players out there. And he's a productive back. He's physical. He runs hard. He's got pretty solid speed, a little bit of shake to him as well. DeWayne McBride provides a good complement, and I liked that selection a lot. So hopefully some tandem of those guys can get it done for them down the stretch. But regardless, what I said rings true. The line play is a massive concern for this team. It has been for years.
100%.
It's a bit head-scratching to go on just not addressing it, but you could point toward maybe the Kirk Cousins contract a little bit as to why. But how many more years are we going to give this staff that excuse? I know they've only had 1 year with O'Connell, but I just don't know. I especially if we think they're in their window the way they are, you needed to see some semblance of improvement with this team, and I just did not get those vibes from these selections here, frankly. But anywho, maybe transition a little into the defense. You can start us off here if you'd like.
Yeah. I want to start off by, saying that despite what we've had to say about, not addressing the offensive line, the defense is really where I think a lot of the problems throughout the season, and maybe that idea of that their 13-4 season, was maybe a smokescreen of sorts for how they were actually going to perform. They were ranked 31st in yards allowed and tied for 28th in points allowed. And yet they managed to win 13 games with a point differential across the season of -3. I don't know how you have a point differential of -3 and you win 13 football games. But regardless, one thing that I think is going to be a massive improvement is bringing in Brian Flores. I really like Brian Flores, especially when it comes to locking up the run game. When he was over there in Pittsburgh, He helped turn a run defense that was ranked dead last in 2021 into a top 10 group in the past season. So I think that easily it's a big upgrade for them on defense. And, I think this is going to be a similar formula that I'm going to bring up a couple of times throughout this episode, that, the offense has the weapons that it needs to produce, but if they have, some marginal improvement on the defensive side of the ball, maybe they can pull away in some of those games, like you were saying, and then they're not hanging in there with the Commanders or playing at the pace of the Commanders or the Cardinals. If Brian Flores can come in and make a significant turnaround on that side of the ball, then this team is going to be looking at another very successful season, I suspect. If they can even improve marginally, if they can avoid the predictable at this point first round upsets, I don't see why this team shouldn't expect a very good season. I think a complete defensive rebuild may be closer on the horizon than maybe fans want to admit, especially when the offense has been producing at a high level and Kirk Cousins' time in Minnesota is potentially coming to a close, depending on what they do in this coming offseason. But they did bring in some new guys here. They did bring in Marcus Davenport and the likes of Byron Murphy. As as a Saints boy, Davenport, he was solid. I will say, just as a caveat, you were with me when they took Davenport and traded up at 11th, and they took Davenport instead of Lamar Jackson, which is fine. He's a quality starter in this league. But that's one that haunts me. But they did bring him in. That one did hurt. They did bring him in. I think he's going to be, an immediate quality starter on the edge. And Byron Murphy, I think, is going to help lock up that secondary a little bit. Pairing him up with, Harrison Smith. And I think with Brian Flores coming in and doing what he needs to do, and if this defense improves even marginally, they can expect, they have a high floor, I guess, is my ultimate point here with Brian Flores coming in and making some improvements on the defense.
All right, well, I think you've made some pretty fair points. I pretty much roundly disagree, though, with the idea that they can really even improve to a league average level at this point. I'm pretty down on this defense, frankly. I'm down on the moves
totally
they made
fair
to improve it as well. And not to take away from Brian Flores' addition, because I agree with you. Brian Flores is a upper level defensive coordinator. I mean, we both probably agree he should be a head coach right now in the NFL.
Absolutely.
But he kind of got the short end of the stick with the Miami situation. A lot of people feel, and I probably agree. But that aside, he's a high level D coordinator, but it really doesn't matter what kind of coordinator you get in the building when you have this sort of it's both. It's talent, it's starting talent, and it's along with a lack of depth. And that's kind of where I'm at with this Vikings defense. I apologize, Vikings fans, but they're doing the classic kind of, refurbishing projects on past prospects, like a Ross Blacklock in the depth mix. James Lynch never really worked out. I think he was from Baylor when he came out. I was okay with him as a prospect, but he's another guy that's quite limited. He's not very versatile in his skill set. And just from the starting perspective, I'm okay with Harrison Phillips, but outside of Danielle Hunter and this new Davenport addition, I don't know where you're getting your pass rush from. And as we know, in the current NFL, pass rush is all about the rotation. And if you don't have legit 4 or 5 guys who can consistently pressure the quarterback, and I'm not even talking about sack production, I'm talking about pressures, you're going to be in trouble. And that's kind of the way I view this defense, is I don't see 2 guys outside of Davenport, who was a much-needed addition, and I can't fault them for that necessarily, and the Danielle Hunter mainstay guy. Love Danielle Hunter. God bless him for staying as long as he has. I wouldn't blame him for wanting to get out of there. I think he had a holdout for a while, and I have no idea what ground Minnesota feels they have to stand on not paying him when you consider the surrounding talent. It's like this guy's been ultra productive, working with next to nothing around him for as long as I can remember, as he's been in the league. But not to go in on them too hard, but honestly, I just have to give it my truthful analysis here, and I don't know where the consistent pass rush is going to come from. And when you pair that with a secondary that I have very legit concerns about on top of that, I am very, very low on the likelihood that they can be, like you're saying, even league average under the direction of Flores. To go a little further into the secondary, I know I've been talking for a moment, but let me just kind of cover what I mean when I say this. Andrew Booth has been a guy who's had injury concerns. He's had problems staying on the field. I actually really like Andrew Booth's talent level, and I would love to see him put together a healthy season because, God, they need it. They selected Mekhi Blackman in the 3rd round. He's pretty underwhelming prospect from my perception. Would love to see him prove me wrong as always. Not really doing a lot for me there. I think he's at best their nickel off rip. I don't think he's going to do much to challenge Booth if Booth is healthy. And if he has to start on the outside year 1, that's going to be a problem for them. And then as far as Byron Murphy goes, he had a rough few years with Arizona. Popped quite a bit in his first season, but kind of fell off a cliff after that. And I would be able to tell you as a NFC West watcher, Murphy was having a lot of issues in coverage. He's not a particularly physical corner as he was kind of billed to be coming out of UW. Murphy, I felt, was a bit of a overpay by desperation, and I think at the end of the day, I think Davenport fits into a similar billing. How much better do we think Davenport can really become? He was a strong player for the Saints, but never reached the ceiling that was expected of him, considering his draft compensation, or the draft compensation they used on him.
He's never going to be your number 1 pass rush.
No, and he's good as a compliment to Danielle Hunter, but when you pay him a market value deal on the free agent market, I mean, this is kind of the issue with free agency, and I've always been a bit of I don't know if I want to ever be a team that's overly active in the free agent market for this reason. Usually those guys are out there for a reason. Even if they're a quality player like Davenport, they're out there for a reason, and I felt that it was the same with Byron Murphy. I'd love to hear you maybe push back on me if you want to.
Oh no, I mean, I think it is, as I noted, this defense is much closer to a rebuild than I think people suspect. Like, I think fans are, very high on the Vikings defense and Brian Flores, being able to come in and turn it around. Overall, though, I mean, I understand your point. Like, there's just not a whole lot there in terms of pass rush, and Harrison Smith, he's been a Viking for a long time, and he has been a part of some very big games, but he's coming in for his what is this, his 11th season. He's been exposed, certainly. Like, the secondary is not particularly a strong area, the pass rush is not a particularly strong area. I completely see your point. I do believe, though, that the addition of Brian Flores is he knows exactly what kinds of players that he's going to want to go out and get. At this point, he's going to come in, he's going to run a scheme that he wants to run, and then maybe next offseason is the time when he begins the rebuild and goes out and gets some players that he needs in order to run the scheme and the defense that he wants. But, as of right now, this upcoming season, I completely see your point. There's not a whole lot here to, love. I think that they've, improved somewhat, but yeah, they had to overpay to do it, right?
For this season, he has what he has. They're not going to be making any world-beating, season-altering additions at this point, and it's concerning because I didn't even mention the safety play. The Lewis Seen first-round pick from a year ago has not gone to plan. He didn't stand out a whole lot. He still has time. And it's difficult to stand out in a defense of this quality, but at the end of the day, I think they would have expected a little more year 1 impact out of Lewis Seen where they drafted him. Would love to see him prove me wrong once again. I'm always going to include that misnomer, but that disclaimer, sorry. And then the other thing to mention, we didn't even talk about it. Harrison Smith is on this roster, and I mean, Harrison Smith continues to play at a pretty quality level from the safety spot, but I mean, he's done. He's close to done, man. I mean,
Yeah.
he has to be at this point. He's another player where I'm surprised he isn't looking to get out of town at this point, try and maybe ring chase, unless he thinks they have something that I don't know they have here in Minnesota. But yeah, if there's anything, and I want to just kind of counterbalance because I know I've been critical for you guys to hang your hat on, Minnesota fans out there. They're one of the additions they had, and it was an undrafted free agent, actually, was an Ivan Pace Jr., a guy out of Cincinnati that I was a huge fan of. I think Ivan Pace completely fell under the radar for whatever reason. I know there are concerns in, like, a full 3-down role as a linebacker, but at the end of the day, Ivan Pace has an incredibly special pass rushing skill set from the linebacker position. I think in a 3-4 scheme, he's one of those guys where you could kind of keep him out in the linebacker spot and send him on blitzes consistently, disguise that a little bit. So it's probably more of a down-the-road developmental prospect, but was really, really happy to see Ivan Pace land somewhere with holes, like not necessarily holes at linebacker, but they're looking for guys, and he has a chance to prove himself in this spot. So it'll be fun to see how he develops. That's plenty of talk with the Vikings, I think, don't you think?
I think so. I think that just about covers everything I had.
Yeah. We're going to transition over here. We're going to go into the Bears next. First and foremost, if you don't mind me taking
Go
first
for it.
turn here with I think Justin Fields, if for all the sports bettors out there in the world, if you want a nice, maybe low budget kind of bet to go out there and make right now, I don't think there is much of a better bet than Justin Fields for offensive player of the year next season. I think Justin Fields showed all the flashes of some very good development from a passing game standpoint, but obviously more than anything, the step he took with the mobility was just a revelation, honestly, for the Bears, and it was so needed, considering kind of the state and the doubts that were circulating about Fields and his ability. But I feel like it went overnight amongst the media. It seemed like suddenly Fields was the best mobile quarterback in the league, hands down, and there was no discussion. And I don't know. I mean, I think Lamar Jackson probably still holds his own with him, and I think it's maybe a 1A, 1B scenario between their abilities. But just that alone, what he brings from a playmaking standpoint, I think that's a great bet to make. And I think as we get into this added talent here, I think it's reasonable to expect another big step to be taken from a passing game perspective. Where you at?
Yeah,
with that?
and you know, and I completely agree. He's going to take a massive leap, and for them to finally hit on a franchise quarterback in a draft, I think is going to be so huge for that franchise, who, by the way, have never had a 4,000-yard passer in their franchise history, if you can believe that. So having him come in and be able to, isn't it? Yeah, to have him come in and be able to contribute the way that he does in the run game, and as he's going to continue to develop as a passer, the Bears knew what they had, right? Like, that's exactly why they traded out of that first pick, was because we've got our guy, Justin Fields. We know how special he is, and we're going to take every piece of draft capital that we have to try to build talent and put more talent around him to make him as successful as he could possibly be. You know, they brought in so many different players for him. Mainly the one that I like a lot here is DJ Moore, landing in Chicago, added to the likes of running back Dante Foreman, bringing in Robert Tonyan and guard Nate Davis, and then they also drafted a rookie, Darnell Wright. You know, they've had personnel changes on the O-line and the receiver room and the running back room, all to try to complement what they know Justin Fields can do as their franchise quarterback. And I think that that is the smart thing to do when you have a guy break out like that and you've never had, you know, the guy, so to speak, in your franchise history like that. This is exactly what you need to do. Put the pieces around him that he needs to be successful, and you build off of that for as long as you possibly can.
Exactly. And why am I so bullish on his potential step further forward. I mean, it really comes down to the shift in what Chicago's been willing to do to utilize his skill sets. I felt like forever with Eberflus, they were just trying to kind of figure out what they had to some degree, or sort of give him the rookie treatment and like really have him play within the structure of the offense to some degree. But it felt like last season, excuse me, Eberflus reached a point with the offense where he was like, we need to just do whatever it takes to produce at this point, because there's just obviously not enough around Fields. And it seemed to me like the moment they decided to start designing the scheme more around his running skill set, giving schemed up intentional looks for him to run with the ball.
Yeah.
And that was really what unlocked his capability that was hiding from us all that time. Obviously, it exposes him to injury somewhat more, and I think that was another factor about why they were keeping him bottled up more so early on. But that's the microcosm here to me of like what these moves represent from this offseason standpoint, because they're not really doing anything here that is going to go outside of what Fields can do currently with what they know he is, right? I think this all builds to strengthen and even further like boost Fields' ability, because like you said, DJ Moore, he's a guy that's going to produce his own open looks for all intents and purposes out there on an island. He's going to shake corners off of him. Majority of the time when you pass the ball to DJ Moore, he's wide open. And that's for good reason, because he's got some of the most crisp routes in the game. He's, I mean, you know, not the biggest sized wide receiver, but he's stocky. He's built so thickly and can just out-physical a lot of guys to the ball. And, you know, I mean, I liken him to a Steve Smith in a lot of ways, where with his prior team in some ways. Maybe not the same deep ball production as a Steve Smith, but plays in a similar kind of style. And I think it's why you saw the Panthers were really, really hesitant to give him up in that deal they made, was for this exact reason. They know what they have in DJ Moore. And at the end of the day, he just complements Fields' style so well. He's going to create open looks and open, easy completions to get Fields in rhythm and get him like popping with his pass game a little bit more. And we already know they made the deal for Claypool, who's going to be hopefully some kind of deep threat, as well as a little bit like a hybrid type of guy where they'll do like design handoffs to him and things along those lines. Again, all touches and opportunities that you can manufacture for these guys. Not anything that you're really asking Fields to play beyond his current abilities. I felt, to go just a little further, I felt the draft pick to grab Tyler Scott exemplifies that exact thing. Is we just want to manufacture easy completions for Fields with guys who we can trust in space. And Tyler Scott was another one of those prospects that I was really fond of. Another, excuse me, I believe he was another Cincinnati guy, but very, very shifty in space. He's going to be certainly one of those screen catching guys out there. Maybe even sharing those opportunities with Claypool on some designed handoffs and jet sweeps and things like that. Where are you at with the weapons, though? That's what I wanted to know. Like, do you feel that they've done enough from a passing game standpoint?
I would say so. I mean, just taking a look at the depth chart here, I mean, the running back room, you've got Foreman and Khalil Herbert, also drafting Rashawn Johnson and Travis Homer. That's a very deep running back room, in my opinion. You know, in the wide receiver room, you now have DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Claypool, St. Brown, the other St. Brown brother. Like you said, Tyler Scott. I mean, this is, and even at the tight end position, you have Cole Kmet and Robert Tonyan now. I just think that this could end up becoming one of the better offensive units coming into next season, period. It's certainly much improved after last season, and the team realizes what they have in Justin Fields, and they spent significantly to get him the weapons that he needs to continue to succeed. I was a big fan of a lot of those moves.
Yeah, and it doesn't stand out from a star impact standpoint so much. Any one addition doesn't necessarily like wow you outside of maybe DJ Moore, I suppose. But I agree with you completely. We have to mention the running back Cerberus that they've assembled here,
Yeah.
and Donta Foreman, Khalil Herbert, who's explosive as they come. We already knew this. I'm sure fantasy players all did a
Performed
collective
very well.
groan of anger when they selected Roshan Johnson on top of that free agent signing for Foreman. I mean, but at the end of the day, are we trying to appease fantasy players, or are we trying to win football games? And, to
Yep.
me, this roster has been assembled strictly and exclusively to run the fucking ball a lot.
Yep.
I think
they're
that
gonna be
was
good at it.
Yes, I think that was the exact same viewpoint. Just to quickly touch on offensive line with that Darnell Wright selection. That first
Yep.
round selection it shows you everything you need to know about their plans for this team in
Yep.
2023, which is they're going to, and 2024, excuse me, they're going to run the ball. They're going to set that edge with Darnell Wright, who is an absolute terror.
Yep.
They got a great first season out of Braxton Jones, who kind of just came out of nowhere for them. Just kind of house money, getting a
Absolutely.
solid
Yeah.
left tackle out of nowhere for them. That was huge. And
You love to
Cody
see it.
Whitehair has been respectable as well. They went and grabbed Nate Davis, like you're saying. These acquisitions on top of the tight ends with Komet and Tanyan to bookend, it creates a scheme that you can utilize very easily for two tight end sets almost all the time, or very, very often, and just throw out a fresh version of whatever running back you want to put
Yeah.
out there on top of Fields. I mean,
Yeah, I like a lot what you said about the line. The O line was a bit inconsistent in 2022, and as we said, they made some improvements. In the offseason. The note here, they're shifting Jenkins to left guard after playing right guard last season, and Whitehair's going back to center, played left guard in 2022, and some of Whitehair's best seasons came playing center. He could prove ultimately to be the best player on the O-line after this season if he goes back home to playing center and he's got all the support around him, and we have those two tight end sets like you're saying with Tanyan and Komet, who are great in the run block game. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with, especially after Justin Fields, too many Justins, coming off the season that he had. I mean, there's just so much to love about this run game. I mean, from a fantasy perspective alone, to me, it really won't matter ultimately that much which of the running backs that you'll have your take of here. I mean, I think they're all going to get their looks. I think they're all going to have their opportunities. They don't have one guy that's going to come in and be, have 80% of the snaps through the whole season, but at any given point, any of these guys is going to be able to come in and produce for you.
well, and that's kind of where I go with the pass game jump being made to me, is that if you stack up your run game to this degree to where you could conceivably be that dominant on the ground, you just create so much opportunity for yourself to set up play action and get all
Yep.
of these like trick play, jet sweep, handoff screens, you name it. They can do
Yep.
it now because the defense is going to have to respect this run game one way or the other. And that all is going to lead to easy completions for Justin Fields. And to me, that's why, from a statistical production standpoint, I could very well see Fields going bonkers this year, just going complete apeshit, frankly. So,
Agreed.
yeah. All right, great. I'm glad we got into
completely
that.
agreed.
Seems like we, kind of on the same page with that, which is good. Touching on the defense a little bit, I mean, you mind if I start us off on the defense?
Go for it.
All right,
Absolutely.
so the first thing we have to mention here is obviously those linebacker additions. Massive, massive factor.
Yep.
I can tell you, as a Seattle fan, the Vic Fangio scheme, which Seattle has been trying to implement, going away from their classic 4-3 under type of cover 3 heavy scheme, a little more to the Fangio, more inventive kind of style of things. There are a few things that you have to have from a Fangio scheme perspective, in my personal opinion, and you can argue on which is the most important, but it's 3 things. You have to have hyper-athletic safety play. You have to have high-level linebacker play, to kind of patrol over the top. And at the end of the day, we're talking about a scheme where you only have two true off-ball linebackers out there generally.
Right.
You like to run a nickel a lot. So you got to have really rangy guys in that regard, same way, really secure tacklers. And the last thing would be a legit interior D-line presence. And to me, the addition of those linebackers, namely TJ Edwards, and then the big deal for Tremaine Edmonds, those are defense-making additions from my perspective.
100%.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, they got a great deal for TJ Edwards. Very underrated part of that Philly defense last year, an ascending player. I don't think he's tapped into anything close to his potential so far. I liken him to sort of like a Patrick Queen type of player, just beefier, just just a little bit more dependable in the run support aspect, but very, very reliable in pass coverage as well in his own right. And then Tremaine Edmonds was, as a draft prospect, just a complete freak of nature. And hasn't necessarily taken the league over since his selection, but he was by no means a point of weakness for that Bills defense in his own right.
A legit good starter, yes.
And you could criticize, you could certainly criticize the decision to give him the massive deal and then also let Roquan Smith walk.
Right.
The prior, offseason, I guess middle of the season essentially. But you also have to factor in all of the draft assets they received from dealing Roquan Smith away to the Ravens. So to me, you get Edmonds, which is maybe somewhat bit of a downgrade from Roquan Smith, but you free up all that money to go and make these savvy moves like TJ Edwards and others that we'll get into. I can't help but say, wow, I love that. I love the decision to build from that specific position group.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was the defensive side of the ball was clearly the weakness, right? Like just last year in yardage, 29th in the league, 32nd in the league in points allowed. They were not good. They were dead last in points allowed, which, that's how you end up with the number one pick. But they are not all number one picks are created equally. They were a number one pick, like you said, with a franchise quarterback that allowed them to deal that pick to get assets. As to whether or not these adjustments and additions, gives them the leap that they're looking for, jury is still out a little bit, I think, for me. Gave up an average of 27.3 points on the season and an average of 31.3 points through the final 9 games. I don't know how you turn that around in one offseason. I don't know if you can, but, certainly, grabbing TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds is not a bad place to start. I also really liked that they picked up, is it Gervon Dexter Sr.?
Gervon Dexter.
Gervon. Yeah, he watched some of his tape, and he's very, very good. I think that he's going to come in and, in the future going to be able to contribute heavily in that run defense. And, even getting Tyreek Stevenson where they got him, I think is going to be a good addition as well. The unit is still a little bit of a work in progress for me. But I think the fans can certainly find hope in the fact that this looks like a unit that is on the rise and on what seems to be a franchise quarterback on the other side of the ball. If they can bring these units together and play complementary football, they really do have a bright future ahead of them. And I think that this offseason and the additions that they've made in the draft and in free agency is a great place to start.
Sure. And I mean, getting into the D-line, like you're saying, I don't really share the same perspective as you on Gervon Dexter. I personally, watching his tape, felt this was one of the slowest off the ball in terms of just get up, It just seemed to me, and this, there's a lot of people that disagree. He's actually kind of a controversial prospect because some people are on my side and some people are on that side. It just seems like you either love him or you hate him. But regardless, there's other defensible decisions that they made to improve this unit, in my opinion. I really love the Zach Pickens selection. They grabbed him in round 3. I think that's just perfect value for him, to be honest. He was kind of an overlooked guy. And then obviously the decision to grab Tyreek Stevenson.
In the
that
second,
was,
yeah.
Yeah, that was an excellent addition as well, although not on the D line. But maybe the idea is to strengthen what was already, I don't want to call it a strength just because we know this defense wasn't good last year, but if you want to point toward a position where they're trending up a little bit more, I would say it's in the secondary. They already had Eddie Jackson secured, who is an all-pro level safety. Jaquan Brisker is a dog. He had an amazing first season. Unfortunately, had a little bit of injury concerns, but we know what he brings. And then Jalen Johnson is a pretty underrated outside starting corner. I don't think he's ever going to be a number one for you, but he's a quality number two. And between Kyler Gordon and I think this would be his second or third season, and maybe a bit of a position battle there with Tyreek Stevenson for the outside spot. They're going to put together a quality secondary here to complement the D-line. But, yeah, I'm just a little concerned. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to hold that against them because, again, this is a unit that was so poorly constructed and just lacking talent anyway that there was zero chance they're going to just turn around in a single offseason. But what they've been able
Nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, from a single season perspective, this is night and day compared to last year.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, between, Zach Pickens is going to be depth and Gervon Dexter is going to be depth for the early portions of their careers. But I like the decision to go grab a Rasheem Green, who's been an ultra-dependable guy. Maybe there's a bit of bias there. He's a former Seahawk, but he put together a good season on Houston, and they went and stole him away. So, between him, DeMarcus Walker, hopefully they have some semblance of a respectable rotation there on the pass rush. But at the end of the day, I think, unfortunately, we are in a bit of a... We're in for another tough season in regards to the overall performance of the defense, even as high as I am on all these additions. Was there anything else on the draft class that stood out to you? Because they had a whopping, 10 selections in this draft?
Yeah, Roshan Johnson in the fourth, I think, was a steal where they got him. I think, ultimately, I would not be surprised if he doesn't move up that depth chart very quickly. I mean, especially if you have any sort of injury concerns throughout the season, which you never hope for. But if the stars align in some way where he's, impressing at camp or something, and they want to get him out on the field, I think that he has incredible upside. I really liked him out of Texas, and, he was the other Texas running back that wasn't named Bijan Robinson, so I think not nearly enough people have heard of him. Yeah. But yeah, he's a running back that I am super high on, and to get him in the fourth round, I think is just incredible value.
Yeah, a little bit of a Reggie Bush, Lendell White situation going on there, where Bijan is so generational in nature and just game breaking that a guy like Roshan kind of falls under the radar, but an excellent running back in his own right. Unfortunately, he's going to be a little buried on this depth chart, most likely. But I think at the end of the day, talent rises to the top. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little bit more work than we would expect in his first season. But yeah, I mean, Bears fans, at the end of the day, I told you what I feel about Gervon Dexter. I feel like that's a bit of not even a bit, just a legit reach. But it's a good sign when your first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 selections in the draft.
Yeah.
That's 6 of 7 that I'm in on for your first 7 selections. So great sign and an absolutely excellent haul considering the holes and the issues you have, the need for this kind of talent to be injected. Got to say, I love what the Bears are doing, and I love the direction they're headed right now.
Absolutely. Agreed. All right, now we're going to talk about the Lions, everybody's, new favorite of the offseason. Rightfully so. I think that the culture that Dan Campbell's brought there is clearly, working out, and they had a very unfortunate start to their season, but once things started going, they really started cooking. I thought they had some really nice additions in the offseason. The one thing that I do want to say is the discrepancy here between their offensive production versus their defensive production is, starting to become quite a theme here in the NFC North that I'm noticing. They had the overall fifth points for last year, and we're bottom 5 in the league for points against. They had the overall 4th ranked offense in 2022 though, and I am interested because they're doing it in a way that not really a lot of people would expect when you see those numbers. When this offense is producing at this level, if their defense can improve even a little bit, like we were talking about with the Bears, if they can improve to even an average unit in the league, I think that they can just potentially straight up contend for the NFC Championship ultimately. I think that's somewhat due to the fact that the NFC is considerably weaker than the AFC right now. It's a little bit more open. That leads me to say that. But I really, really like ultimately what they've been able to do with Jared Goff. I know that not a lot of people are high on Jared Goff, but call me crazy, but I just think that Jared Goff is consistently a very efficient quarterback in this league, and the way that they've been able to create this offense, it's sort of like that air raid scheme that he was used to when he was over there at Cal, and he was like bottom half in the league in just pure air yards, which meant that a lot of that yardage and that production came after the catch, and it's because they're able to generate an offense where if he can throw the ball accurately, on time, and efficiently, and get it to receivers who can get there on time, they are able to just take it to the house a lot of the time. I know that you and I have talked quite a lot about this, but I'm a big Amon-Ra St. Brown fan exactly for that reason. I've had him 2 years now in a row in our fantasy league, and I would not be sad to have him again. I am very high on Amon-Ra St. Brown and what he can bring to this offense.
Thanks for trading him to me, by the way.
Yeah, you're welcome. We don't have to bring that up. But yeah, I mean, ultimately what they've been able to do is that their yards after the catch and just that yak ability has really taken this defense to another level, and they have created an offense where Goff does not have to be that guy where he has to stretch the field and take bombs and be the guy that just pushes it downfield constantly. If he can get it there accurately, on time, efficiently, it's kind of a crazy comparison to make, but this is something that Brett Coleman and EJ Snyder talked a little bit about on their Bootleg Football podcast. Shout out to those guys. But it's very much like the Tom Brady days when he had Wes Welker or Edelman, where he could get it there on time, accurately, and efficiently, and they were able to create so much after the catch. I just really like what they've been able to do schematically on offense. They had some head-scratching draft picks. I remember when you and I were watching the draft, we were a little bit surprised, to see Jahmyr Gibbs taken in the first round. But, I think that Dan Campbell is just one of those guys that sees a guy that he likes, and he's really not going to care what anybody has to say about it. He's going to go out and get that guy. But overall, yeah, I mean, clearly what they're doing is working. They had the 4th-ranked offense last year. And they had a really, really strong end to the season despite having a really unfortunate 1-6 start. And if they can avoid a disastrous start like that, I think that they have their floor is pretty high and their ceiling's even higher.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. The one thing I will push back on just a tad is the draft class, because yes, my initial reaction to the draft class was sort of what everyone else's was. Like, these are like all seem to be reaches, but actually in retrospect, looking over the class itself, if we're going off of consensus boards or whatever you want to go, if you take that top 4, those selections, it was Jahmyr Gibbs and Campbell. Those are their 2 first-round picks, and then it was Sam Laporta and Brian Branch. Well, one way or another, those 4 make up the equivalent to 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders for my money. I think if you flip the decisions and you say maybe they took Brian Branch with that first-rounder, and then they went Jahmyr Gibbs with the second first-rounder, which we can't say if Jahmyr Gibbs would even be there. So I actually understand their decision to jump on him and secure him early, even though that has had a lot of criticism levied at it. At the end of the day, you ended up with 2 legit first-round players in Gibbs and Branch. And then I think as far as Sam Laporta and Jack Campbell go, if those are your second rounders, then we're in a completely different world talking about, wow, those are great value selections in the second round. So, I mean, if you turn it around, that 4, to me, it's equivalent to the draft compensation they used on them, because Sam Laporta was certainly going to be a high second rounder. Jack Campbell would have been lucky to get out of the first round in their scenario. But I digress a bit. As far as keeping it on topic with the offense, I just wanted to kind of loop the Gibbs selection into that discussion, because at the end of the day, I'm not sure whether they knew at the time or not about the draft. I think they knew that they were not going to have Jameson in the class selection. And I think the fact that they knew that actually really impacted the decision to take Gibbs where they took him. Because if you look at this depth chart, wide receiver is an area of concern for me, without a doubt. You were talking about Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is incredible. Definitely a Cooper Kupp-esque level impact player in the slot. Would love to see him continue what he's been doing, and I don't doubt that he will. But outside of that, we're talking about kind of some journeymen and just unproven young players surrounding him. They bring in Marvin Jones, which in a vacuum, I actually would probably love that addition. It's really cool to have him return to his old stomping grounds, obviously, and he's a great deep. He's still not a great, but he's still a good deep ball receiver. Still pretty productive when you give him the volume. But without Williams in the discussion, he's going to be your number 2. I'm not entirely in fact, I'm sure that Marvin Jones can't be a number 2 in the league any longer. I think he's best suited as a complementary 3rd or 4th option. And they have those things in Josh Reynolds, who's another journeyman, like I was mentioning, from the Rams. He's given them good snaps. He's a solid player, but not world-beating either. So at the end of the day, I don't see a wide receiver of this group, along with Khalif Raymond, who's the young guy that really is a pure slot and can only be a pure slot. I don't see a member of this wide receiver core that can come in and replace what Jameson Williams would have meant to them as the de facto wide receiver 2 to Amon-Ra. And that, to me, influences the decision to select Gibbs, because, as we know, Gibbs can give you solid slot snaps as well, as a running back, receiver kind of hybrid guy. He has ultra reliable hands coming out of Bama. In fact, I kind of liken Bijan and him as sort of a new age Adrian Peterson, Marshawn Lynch type of running back duo coming out of the draft. Not to say that Gibbs is anything like Lynch as a prospect, but in terms of like high level impact, high level talent guys, Gibbs is right there with anybody in terms of a college prospect. So I can't really hate on the decision to grab him, considering they're going to need to get creative with what you're saying and doing an air raid style, switching the scheme up. They're going to be on their back heels to some degree, I think, in terms of just having enough talent to kind of get those targets divided amongst these guys. Where do you stand? Yeah, do you think any of these guys can ascend and fill in for what Williams would have brought?
You know, it's interesting you say that in conversation with, you know, the Gibbs pick, because I think that, you know, Jahmyr Gibbs may very well be a wide receiver lined up at running back, or just a wide receiver on, you know, the depth chart as a running back. He is a guy that seems to me that is going to be catching a ton of balls out of the backfield and is going to really unleash a whole other level to the pass game, right? Like air raid offenses, it's pretty simple. Ultimately, there's a few, key concepts that you need, but overall, you can build a whole schematic tree out of those few concepts. And when you have a guy like Gibbs who can give you so much as a receiver out of the backfield in tandem with clearly what talent they already have with this air raid offense, I think that the sky is truly the limit. I think that's really what they drafted him for, in tandem with the fact that, Jameson Williams, he will be out for the first 6 games, but he will come back. And, bringing in Gibbs, giving him 6 games back there with, maybe he'll see some more targets in those first 6 weeks, and then when Williams comes back, things that load gets considerably lighter and things get easier.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you're right. I think that that is a weakness for me as well. The wide receiver room is, on paper, nothing to write home about, but clearly they were able to produce at a level far beyond what it looks like here on the depth chart. And yeah, to me, the other thing I would like to note here is that there are reports of Sam Laporta just absolutely being on a tear in the early ongoings of camp. They are just completely raving about him. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that, in hindsight, we can kind of take a look at these first four picks of the draft and say, like, you know what, actually, these are probably all hits. The fact that Brian Branch even fell that far into the second was kind of shocking to me. And the fact, unbelievable value there. And especially when they needed desperately some depth in the secondary, and they needed a guy to be able to come in and contribute day one. Getting Brian Branch in the second is fantastic. Yep. So if Gibbs and Laporta, Branch, Campbell, they can all work out, then maybe they caught way too much flack for those first few picks in the draft.
Agreed. And I think that's the right answer at the end of the day, right? Because Sam Laporta is going to be the X factor for this offense now if they're going to somehow survive the loss of Jameson Williams. I think that's the only answer you can provide is, say, Amon-Ra gives you decent outside starting snaps, shares slot responsibilities with Gibbs and some combination of Khalif Raymond as well. Marvin Jones does a little bit for you on the outside. The only answer that sounds even slightly convincing to me is that Sam Laporta has a high-level year-one impact and becomes the go-to number 2 receiving option for this offense. Now, I will stipulate a bit that we know the year-one impact for tight ends is hardly ever magnanimous to that degree, and I do have a little bit of reservations about saying it's possible, but on the other hand, some combination of this talent can certainly get them by and certainly keep them as explosive offensively as they have been in the past. To lend a little further to my point, I think David Montgomery's signing makes a ton of sense 100%. In the context of this whole thing, because if Gibbs isn't going to be a de facto running back, he's going to be an offensive weapon as the GM build him to be. Well, then it makes a lot of sense to have David Montgomery, who is a true 3-down running back. Yep. He's an obvious upgrade from Jamal Williams, and I love Jamal Williams, don't get me wrong, an excellent player in his own right. Holds the franchise record for rushing touchdowns, I believe, for this team. Yep. That doesn't mean, though, that he kind of rivals the skill set of David Montgomery from a 3-down capability. David Montgomery can get it done on third. He can catch passes out of the backfield for you. Mm-hmm. He's excellent in pass pro, excellent in first and second down. Big David Montgomery fan. Even if you say, oh, well, you shouldn't pay the running back, it makes sense in the context of the way this offseason went for them. And then the last thing I would say, and obviously we need to address this, but this is, if not the best offensive line in the league, it's certainly a top 3 offensive line in the league, hands down. And that is the one thing to where I can say, even if a legit second receiving option does not emerge from this group of talent, it may not matter because the protection is going to be so excellent for a highly efficient and accurate Jared Goff, like you're saying, that those completions are just going to be there for them at the end of the day, even without Jameson Williams.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, speaking on to the O-line a little bit, like they're even with their interior being a little bit of a shuffle last season, a little bit of a revolving door. With several problems along the way, they will have Halapulavati, Vaitai coming back at guard, which is going to be huge, both literally and figuratively. He's going to be a great asset. And, they did bring in Glasgow. Huge. And they brought in Glasgow as rotational depth to that interior line to avoid maybe some of that inconsistent play through injuries.
Certainly a respectable rotational guy there, Glasgow.
Exactly. Yeah, and, if their offensive line through all of that never ranked outside the top 10, and, it should be considerably better when they're fully healthy. And I think that's another big key to their success is that this O-line has just managed to play very, very well, kept Jared Goff protected, let him do what he needs to do, because he's not a guy that if a play breaks down, he's not going to be able to run outside the pocket or improvise until somebody can get open down the field, right?
Not much.
This is a very, very well-oiled machine, and I think that just speaks, again, to the Dan Campbell's coaching style. I'm a very big fan of what he's been able to create there, and obviously it's working. If everything is working like a machine and it's well oiled with a very clear captain at the helm, I don't see why this offense should be limited, to not repeat the same success, especially, with upgrades at the running back position in the offseason.
Yes.
But yeah, can't say enough good things about that O-line and the way that they've played.
Yeah. The only thing holding me back from saying this is a bona fide top 5 offensive unit in the entire league is the loss of Jameson Williams.
Right.
With Jameson Williams in this lineup, I have absolutely zero reservations about labeling them that. And it may not even end up mattering anyway. They could still achieve that even without him, personally, I think. There's an avenue to it. I think it's going to take, at the end of the day, like I said, a Sam Laporta breakout. And he's a very polished prospect, so let's not discount that possibility. And like you said, the training camp reports, or was it just OTAs? I guess it would be.
Yeah, I believe so, but just early reports on in camp is that he is completely killing it, and that he is just impressing on every rep and every snap that he's getting, and that they couldn't love it more. I know.
Exciting stuff when you pair it with this prolific tackle duo that they field week in, week out, and Frank Ragnow, possibly the best center in the entire NFL. I mean, it's a lot to get excited about for a Detroit fan.
Yeah.
And then let's transition, because there's a lot to talk about with the defense as well. Similar to the Bears, this is the weakness of this team, the obvious weakness, a unit that's still in progress of being built. But I don't know, for me, I'm a lot more optimistic about the early returns of the new look Detroit Lions defense as I was about the Bears. Why don't you tell me a little bit about where you stand before I go in?
Yeah, they did have that explosive offense, with a defense that did rank 32nd, very last in the league in yards allowed. 32nd in yards allowed, 28th in points allowed. That
makes sense
defense,
when teams got to chase you like they did last year, though.
Exactly. I mean, this defense, they were just downright bad. Their passing defense was ranked near bottom 3 in the league. They did add Jack Campbell and Brian Branch in the draft, which, as we discussed earlier, is going to be, if they end up working out, and I'll look at that. If they end up working out, being and hitting, they're clearly on the up and up. Another thing that I wanted to note here is that both Charles Harris and Romeo Okwara both took pay cuts to re-sign.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
They did.
Wow.
They did, which gives this defense the rotational depth I think they need to be able to play, more attacking defense.
We call that the Dan Campbell effect.
That's right, exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. And I think one thing that's interesting to note as well is that despite the fact that they played so poorly, I think one way that they were able to win as many games as they did is that they did have a high turnover differential. They had a turnover differential of +7, which is, I think it was like top 5, maybe top 10 in the league last year, which allowed them to stay in games. Like when you have an explosive offense like that, any opportunity you can get to get that defense off the field and that offense back on the field is going to be a marked improvement. And the other thing too is that I really, really like the CJ Gardner-Johnson signing, who again, he could have gotten a bigger deal in free agency. But I'm sure that he came to the Lions because of the culture that Dan Campbell's created and where the team seems to be headed. Also bringing in Cam Sutton. Those will be immediate difference makers in the secondary. Last year, they both combined for 23 passes defended and 9 interceptions. I'm very, with a grain of salt, I am more optimistic about this defense than, like you said, than I was about the Bears. I think if they can have an improvement and jump just a little bit in performance, then they're really going to be a team that you're going to have to watch out for in the NFC, especially if they make a playoff run. You just never know when you play football with that style of efficiency, and then you have a defense that's not going to fold and sell games for you. They're going to be a very good team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something I didn't even mention, and it deserves mentioning, that the draft went the way it did for them, and I have to commend them for the way they drafted in this personally, because they had to pivot from what they thought was a locked-in selection at number 6. They had their eyes all over Devin Witherspoon. It was a lock-in for that selection if he was there. I think they just got surprised by Seattle and their decision to grab him at 5. I think Seattle kind of surprised the entire league by taking him where they did.
I was surprised.
Not to say that he's not worthy of that selection. I mean, Devin Witherspoon is generational corner prospect without a doubt. But, I think the reason I bring up Devin Witherspoon is that I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson, his addition is so important for this defense, because you're looking at what was already a very underrated unit with the safety tandem of Kirby Joseph and Tracy Walker together, both such high-level players in their own right. But they grabbed Brian Branch now, who actually is just so scheme versatile that he can literally man up on the outside on legit wide receivers and lock them up. I don't think his role or his name in literal definition is going to be safety, or in terms of his on-field capability and what they ask him to do. His name on the depth chart is safety, but they're going to ask him to move all throughout this.
He'll line up all over the field.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He's going to get outside snaps. I think the same with C.J. Gardner-Johnson, depending on just who the receiver is. And between the incredible versatility and athleticism of this safety tandem, combined with some combination of Branch, Gardner-Johnson playing outside, playing nickel, slotting into safety at times. I mean, we're talking about 4 players here that are so versatile, can do all kinds of things, can hit you, can man up on you, can play great in zone. They all have tremendous ball skills. This is a dangerous secondary right here, and
100%.
This is the exact reason I can't fault them for what they did in the draft, because at the end of the day, you went and got Branch. We talk about all the time, what separates the good GMs in the drafts is the decisions you make that seem obvious. How many teams don't make the obvious decision to grab Sidney Brown when he falls like Philly did, or Brian Branch like the Lions did? I mean, with Philly, it's every pick. But really, that's what makes Howie Roseman such a great GM. And I look at the Lions GM, he clearly knows what he's doing when it comes to identifying players that are undervalued. And to me, like you said, all of those draft picks are hits. Hits are really what this Lions defense needed. Getting legit starters who are dependable, like Jack Campbell, for instance, who's so all around, such a physical sort of enforcing presence on the inside. I think he complements more of a kind of finesse style backer like Anzalone, who they bring back, and Malcolm Rodriguez, who's actually quite physical in his own right, but he's good in pass coverage as well. I think those guys all complement each other well. So I'm really excited about the linebacking core and the secondary unit together. We didn't even mention, they keep coming, I suppose. Cam Sutton getting brought in, such an underrated player for Pittsburgh. Another guy who's on the ascent. Emmanuel Mosley put together good games with the 49ers. We know what he brings. There just aren't a lot of holes on the defense from the linebacking core up, to me.
Right, exactly.
And that's why I'm so much more bullish to say, like, this unit, you're about to see a tremendous turnaround for these guys, because, like you said, they were able to retain Romeo Okwara, very unexpected. He's a great player. He's a good running mate for, I shouldn't say a good player, but he's a good running mate for Aiden Hutchinson. and they have sort of a chemistry built already. And James Houston was another guy we have to mention, coming off a massive breakout for them. He was unexpected, sort of a house money selection that just put together an incredible first season for them. So, yeah, all in all, my take is this defense is on the ascent, on the up and up, and it's being built in a very intentional fashion that I can get behind big time.
100%. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Do you have any closing thoughts with them? I didn't mention interior D-line, but I like Aleem McNeil too.
No, that's all I had for the Lions there.
Last X factor, can I just mention before we move on is,
Absolutely.
I mean, Levi Onwuzurike was such a touted prospect coming out of UW and hasn't put it together, hasn't shined much, but the jury is not out on him. And I think this guy is, if you want to talk about a under-the-radar X factor that could really put them over the top, if he somehow put it together this year and became like a penetrating interior D-line presence to go along with such a stout point of attack, natural 5-tech, 0-tech in McNeil, I mean, suddenly you're talking about a team that's really strong stopping the run, and their pass rush is rolling with Hutchinson returning. I mean, the sky's the limit.
I couldn't agree more. And it's like I said earlier, right? Like they already had a defense that was, played very bad last year, that they were just not good. And yet they still managed to turn the ball over a lot. So I think that, looking forward, they're going to have a defense where they're going to be like, okay, not only are we no longer playing on our heels, like let's go play, that damn cannibal football that we want to play, and let's go attack on defense. And when you have a defense like that, when you are confident that if they can get the ball back, that you get the offense back on the field and you're probably going to score. I mean, I really, really like what the Lions have put together here, and I really think that this defense is going to have a marked improvement in this upcoming season, and I do not suspect that 1-6 start will happen again. And yeah, I'm very high on the Lions coming into next season.
Yeah, they finally got the dogs to run the show here. I think
That's
they
right.
just haven't had the talent in the past, but
Yep.
Who knows? I mean, nothing's holding them back now, from my perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, good natural time to move to the Packers. I feel like I just dominated the Lions discussion because I'm so excited about their team, but that's fine.
They're an easy team to get excited about.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I just want to let you start off and talk about the Packers. What stood out to you? Just let you kind of take the reins.
Yeah, nothing crazy in the offseason like that. No like big, massive structural changes at all. Nothing that I can think of.
I felt like they were kind of hamstrung for some reason. I don't know what that reason would have been, but it's almost like they didn't know what their future was going to look like. So they,
But in all seriousness, I mean, obviously, Rodgers' time is done. It is Jordan Love time. Coming into his third season, he only has one start on record. And let's talk a little bit about this here. I just want to say, if Jordan Love is as good as people thought he was the year that he got drafted, and they have a third franchise quarterback in a row, I think the whole AFC North is on suicide watch. I just don't know how they're going to be able to recover from that. I think one interesting thing here, though, I just want to make note here of the offensive line in this little section that I like to call the chicken or the ayahuasca. Did the O-line make Aaron better, or did Rodgers make the O-line look better than they are? I mean, when you win an MVP, I think you lean toward the latter on that. And I just want to say, if Love can't replicate some of the same talent that Rodgers had of working the pocket the way he did, this O-line may struggle to give Love what he needs to be successful. Regardless, when their tackle play when healthy is very good. Zach Tom played incredibly well when Bakhtiari was out, but now he'll be moved out to the right tackle spot after Bakhtiari comes back from injury. But the biggest area of concern for this offense to me is not Jordan Love, but it is the wide receiver room. this is a bottom 10 wide receiver room in the NFL. This is not to say that Doubs and Watson aren't talented, but they are simply unproven up to this point. Watson certainly had a good year in 2022, but his production didn't match his volume. He only saw 66 targets, and reined in only 41 of those and finished with just over 600 yards. I mean, a very good rookie season, right? Like a very good rookie campaign. But, combined, Doubs and Watson finished for just over 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. There are plenty of receivers in the league where that's a standard. Maybe that's a down year. I just think that's going to be a big question mark for me coming into the season, is whether or not Love is going to have what he needs to be successful. I think that the line is going to have a really hard time adjusting from the play style of Aaron Rodgers, and I think that the wide receiver room really leaves a lot to be desired for me in terms of getting open, creating opportunities. We know that Love is a talented passer, but it's going to be his first full year as a starter, and when you're coming in with a whole year as a starter, when people know you're going to be starting, I think that it's going to be a little bit of a different ride than maybe some people are expecting.
Yeah, the one thing he has going for him is that not a lot of teams have film,
not a lot of film
to at least study him off of, so he does maybe have a little bit of that catching teams off guard thing going for him a bit. But I don't know. I think I'm probably going to be like the guy that doesn't believe it till I see it with Jordan Love. It's probably the normal take to have, but I know a lot of people are like I feel like the talk around him is that he's so much better than people realize, and I don't agree with that right now. I think he's about as good as we think he is right now, and he still has room to grow, which is where the intrigue comes from. But I think more or less what we've seen is about what we have with Jordan Love. And what we've seen is not a franchise-level quarterback, but he's not a bad quarterback either. He's probably a top 20 quarterback. And he's never had a full season to settle in, which does a lot for players. We saw it with Geno Smith. He's just the most recent example of that, but it does happen. And you can't discount the fact that he's had to sit for as long as he has. That really does help players a lot. Although you could
Aaron
argue,
Rodgers, no less.
Yeah, fair. And you could argue that could almost hurt them as much as it could help them, though, at this point, when you think about how long he's sat, actually, because in reality, it's been so long that it's almost like now if you don't come out and look really polished and really good, then it's like, well, what were you doing all that time, dude? And
exactly. I mean, it's really like where it was the beginning of the end for the Aaron Rodgers campaign, right? Like, I think that's a lot of pressure for a quarterback. I mean, if you were just a first round pick, you sat a couple years and then, you came in, that's a lot of pressure anyway. But I think with Jordan Love, really where the beginning of the end of all of it and all of the drama and all of the offseason hootenanny and hollering and hoopla, where all of that really stemmed from, I think, was that Aaron felt a certain type of way about them drafting Jordan Love in the first place. So now when you have Jordan Love coming in and you have a whole city that watched you be the reason effectively that their Hall of Fame quarterback demanded to be out and, acted the way that he did. I think that's just another added level of pressure that is not going to be fair to give to Jordan Love. He didn't ask to be drafted to that situation, and Aaron Rodgers certainly could have acted differently about that situation, but that doesn't change the fact that you're completely right. The fact that he's been sitting back there for 3 years, waiting to get his shot, and there was sort of this like attitude that like, well, we have Jordan Love, Aaron, if you want to leave, that's why we drafted him. And now's the time that where he left and he's going to be the starter for the whole upcoming season, and that's it's going to be a lot of pressure put on him to perform immediately, which is not going to be fair.
Yeah, I think the pressure's certainly on. The fan base does seem to be behind him. I think, honestly, the biggest W that the Packers took this offseason was finally being done with the Aaron Rodgers saga.
Agreed.
And freeing themselves from all of that drama and, emotional turmoil that you're describing. I mean, I can identify very well as a Seahawks fan. It hurt to see Russell Wilson leave initially, but then... Yeah. It was almost a sigh of relief. It's like, God, I think I don't have to like obsess over the media details and everything now, and when it's a circus that can sometimes unite a locker room, and there's something we need to consider the possibility of with this team. But in terms of addressing what you said with the wide receiving core, I agree with you. A little bit underwhelming here. I did not like the selection of Jaden Reed. I'm just going to come out and say it. I thought Jaden Reed was a pretty significant reach in round 2. And I understand the decision to reach, because at the end of the day, this was a need. And there was a pretty significant run on wide receivers in round 1, and there are some of the next tier guys kind of went off prior to that pick. But at the end of the day, that doesn't. My personal opinion is, even if the need is large, don't take a 4th round, 3rd round graded player in the 2nd round just because it's a need.
Right.
Especially considering, as we said, the expectations for Love are relatively low for his first season. It's not going to be a world of difference if he doesn't have that 3rd receiving weapon, because at the end of the day,
Right.
Romeo Doubs is still developing. I think he is at least a respectable number 2, considering we don't really know at all what his ceiling is yet. So maybe he climbs up a little bit. I'm not sure I would really count on it. Thank God they got what they got from Christian Watson, because he really just kind of legitimizes this whole receiving core overall. And Christian Watson, definitely one of the best up-and-coming young receiving talents in the game right now. I am encouraged by him being present there, because he's a guy where, with his explosiveness and yak ability and secure hands, or like as he down the road, he had some more security with his hands. It wasn't pretty initially, but he got better with that. I think it was noticeable about how much better he got with that, because Aaron doesn't trust guys until they have that down. And that's what I would expect. I would expect to see a lot of open, schemed looks to try and get Watson in space a little more. Just give him easy completions, again, similar to the Justin Fields thing. You want to try and get this guy in rhythm. And the same can be said for how I expect them to utilize A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones in another year together. I think there's going to be a ton of checking down and maybe even design screens to those guys.
Oh, yeah. Certainly.
But it does raise the concern and the question that you'd said initially. Are they equipped from an offensive line standpoint to support that kind of trickery and creativity on offense? My short answer would be no. I agree with you that
I agree. Yeah.
I agree with you that it was a big factor was Rodgers' pocket navigation and his ability to sense and evade pressure, making this line better. Although that ability had faded somewhat for Rodgers, I think it was overplayed, that amount of fading that had occurred. And I'm not really particularly blown away by the talent on this O-line. I mean, I love Bakhtiari, of course, and Elgin Jenkins is a legit guard. And I like kind of what you said about Zach Tom. He came on a little bit, although he's not number 1 on the depth chart for me here. I don't know if that's like
I'm seeing Nijman at right tackle as number 1 right now.
Either way, I mean, you know, Tom's unproven, regardless of how well of his last campaign was. That's probably why he's not slotted here. So it'll be a camp battle, but the center spot and the right guard, those are a bit concerning to me. And I think the interior pressure could be an issue for Love. If he's getting too many free blitzers up the middle, that can be really, really tough for a guy still trying to feel out what we're talking about with pocket navigation. Interior pressure is an absolute killer for young quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Let me jump back in a little bit back to the receiving talent just a tad, because I didn't touch even on the additions of Luke Musgrave via the draft and Tucker Kraft as well. I think there's a similar idea going on here as to what we talked about with the Bears, maybe, where they're going to gravitate toward a little more 2 tight end looks to kind of get Jordan Love on some play action rollouts and things like that, just to make his life a little easier, which I do like the idea behind that. At the end of the day, I just think I'm overall, not even a little, I'm just pretty low on this draft class, frankly. I was not a big fan of the Jaden Reed pick, I told you, but I wasn't a fan of the Musgrave or Tucker Kraft selection either, because at the end of the day, I feel like those were both reaches as well. Maybe not so much the Kraft pick, but the Luke Musgrave pick to me was also a reach. He has a lot of physical talent that he brings, but very little polish. Hardly got any receptions at Oregon, was not a big factor for them, truthfully. So I don't know how much you can expect in terms of year one impact out of those additions. And to be honest, it's worrisome because, like you said, I don't know where that production's coming from outside of Watson. They have a lot of different pieces to play with here, but nobody that blows me out of the water. And just to kind of stay true to the scouting that I was doing and just looking into some of these guys, I was not high on Musgrave at all. And I find it a bit head scratching to, let alone just take 2 tight ends within the 3rd round. That decision is odd in of itself. But then you factor in the simple fact that I don't like any of the talents they picked anyway. It's not a good recipe. It's a bit indefensible from my perspective, and I'm a little softer on Jaden Reed because I even like what Jaden Reed brings to some degree, but I don't think he's ever going to be a number 2 necessarily. So they really needed someone that could push Dubs for that spot to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've talked a little bit about this earlier too. Maybe just to try to justify taking the 2 tight ends there. I think that, for the reasons that we've already talked about, is that this is going to be a team that runs the ball a lot. For fantasy purposes, I think people should be really all in on the Packers backfield. Aaron Jones is clearly a talented running back. He's going to have a lot of work, catching passes out of the backfield. And we know what A.J. Dillon can bring. They have a really, really good 1-2 punch. If the offense has one good thing going for it, I think it's that 1-2 punch tandem of Jones and Dillon. And that's fair, Dillon.
But Luke Musgrave is not a good run-blocking tight end.
No, he is not. He is not.
And that's what Tucker Kraft is, so I get that.
Right.
And maybe they're betting on the physical talent of Musgrave to show itself with more volume, but I just can't get behind this class, man. I really can't.
Yeah, I don't see it.
But that being said, this is a natural transition unless you wanted to say more about the offense.
Just one thing.
Yeah.
This is a team that, like we said, this is going to be a team that runs the ball first and foremost. I think if there's one good thing that they have going for it is that they do run a lot of outside zone. That has given them a lot of success in the past. And as long as they have, Dillon and Jones there, I think schematically it's going to alleviate a lot of pressure on Jordan Love to be able to run that outside zone effectively. And even, if Musgrave or Kraft don't end up being, the talents that they were to make it a reach, ultimately, if you're a tight end that can, get open in the field a little bit, and if you can set the edge somewhat on some of those in some of that zone running offense or rushing offense, they will have success. It's not to say that I think they're going to be generational talents or anything like that, but maybe for right now, maybe the Packers are looking at it from the perspective that we know that we're good at running the ball, we know that we're good creating opportunities out of the backfield. Let's just try to run our game where we are running outside zone, which is very, very hard to stop in general. There's some adjustments that you can make to slow it down, but when an offensive line can run it really effectively, it's hard to stop. It'll be a good way for Jordan Love to maybe ease into the offense a little bit if they are effectively able to run some of those schemes effectively.
Right.
But yeah, other than that,
well, sorry, this is a team that clearly is not looking to the now to be maybe competitive, but they're certainly not in a win now window currently.
No.
And I think the prospects they selected do kind of say that to some degree. I mean, Musgrave is a long-term project for them, which is kind of a part of why I have a bit of hesitancy to saying much good things about the selection, because how can you take a developmental prospect with hardly any college production in the second round? I just don't see it. And then with Lucas Van Ness, I mean, he's got a lot of really good tools right now, and he's definitely shown the ability to be dominant in spurts, but he too is developmental. So it's certainly a team looking to the future, but transitioning to the defense, like Van Ness's selection, I did like. That was really the only...
Agreed.
Maybe not the only one. There's a couple others that I was okay with, but I liked where they grabbed him. I don't know. It seems like the Packers, they just like default to D-line whenever they have a first-round pick that...
Yeah, it's nothing new.
Yeah, it's just kind of what they do, so I can't really fault them for that, especially considering Preston Smith's advanced age at this point. He's going to be on the way out sooner or later here. But as far
especially
as
after the season that he had last year when Rashawn Gary came out and he was asked to do a lot of work on that D line that maybe he otherwise wouldn't be. I think that's not really what his role was. I think it was more in compliment to Gary. But yeah, I just want to say you're totally right about Preston Smith, his time there, especially after a really hard season. After losing Rashawn Gary, he had quite the workload too to make up for.
Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that I was going to mention. The only other two picks that I could really sort of get behind with this class was the Wooden selection in the 4th. I like Wooden as a developmental guy as well. He's kind of a bigger body, sort of throwback, kind of like a 3-4 defensive end type where he's going to hold your edge well. He can produce a little bit from the pass rush perspective. But the one pick that I could say I loved this pick, was Carl Brooks in round 5 out of Bowling Green. He was a guy, small school guy, got overlooked. I think he was a bit of a...
Round 6, by the way.
Or round... Really?
179.
Oh, well, this says 5. Sorry. All right, anyway, regardless,
No.
5 or 6 is good value for Carl Brooks.
Yeah,
he was kind of a standout Senior Bowl guy, I believe. Brooks is definitely in the same mold of a kind of inside-outside versatile guy, but he's got a little bit more pass rush upside to him. So I like that selection. I think that's like a nice house money developmental guy to go along with what you're going to get in Van Ness. So you'll see a bit of a changing of the guard with this D-line unit, but at the end of the day, you have to like what they have here on the front 7 realm of things, with obviously Rashawn Gary, such a high-impact player, and Devontae Wyatt was a highly touted prospect. I think can become a superstar eventually. And then Kenny Clark is just the mainstay, reliable guy that they've had forever, and they just keep him around because he's nothing but good for them, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I may disagree a little bit here. D-line, obviously, when healthy, I think they're able to play pretty well. But, for the last few years, this defense has not been good at stopping the run, which in the Aaron Rodgers years was really not that much of a concern. They call cover 3, right down the middle there at 14th most in the NFL, to try to stop the run. Mm-hmm. And they weren't able to stop the run to get their defense, where they wanted to schematically. They were comfortable running a whole lot of quarter, half, or quarters. But, when injuries, kind of bogged down the later half of the season there, when Rashawn Gary got hurt, their personnel weren't built to stop the run when they were running quarters, moving forward, especially when Gary was gone. They just didn't have enough firepower on the edge to stop the run when they were in quarters. And a lot of those duties, ended up falling down on the outside corners. They were able to, do fine for a group that's asked to do that. But it seems to me, I think that Packers fans will agree with me here that they seem to be really frustrated by the lack of adjustments made throughout the season, and rightfully so. It's an issue that needed addressed, especially as they have a first-year starter under center where they are not able to pull away in games like they were in the Rodgers years, and it was maybe not that much of a concern. Preston Smith is a good player, but he's not your feature guy that's going to be consistently disruptive in the pass game. This was a team that really struggled to win up front on the D line, and they didn't have the guys to stop to run the scheme that they wanted to, and they just never adjusted through the season. Stopping the run duties, like I said, were assigned to those outside corners, and those guys could hold the line certainly, but it was not a recipe for success, going forward. Mm-hmm. Like you said, adding Van Ness to this group, of Preston Smith, Darnell Savage, and Jair Alexander. They shouldn't have any issues getting stops through the air, but if the concerns are that they're going to have to play from behind in some situations, which they are almost certainly going to have to, stopping the run is going to become crucial. Yeah, adding Lucas Van Ness to this group, they shouldn't have any issues getting stops through the air, but if the concerns in the run game aren't going to address, it's going to be yet another mediocre season defensively.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to go off of what you're saying, and to clarify my viewpoint prior to what you said, is I'm simply evaluating the talent level on the defense. In terms of scheming and adjustment making, like you're describing, that is all on the defensive coordinator. And this 100%. This is a much aligned defensive coordinator. The Packers fans despise this guy, from what I understand. Joe Barry, he's kind of doing all the things that you're saying, a lack of adjustment and a lack of using the personnel in a way that's going to create an effective defense. And I think when it comes to aspects of defensive play that such as run defense, like you're saying, so much of that is centered around discipline and players understanding their individual responsibilities within a defense, even when they aren't the playmaker, so to speak, what gap to hold, whether you're the penetrator, whether you're the edge setter. A lot of this, to me, can be excused by the, frankly, lack of good leadership on that side of the ball, which is unfortunate for the Packers. But I will say that, in my personal opinion, until they move on from Joe Barry at coordinator, you're going to continue to see these struggles. And I fully expect them to do so after another year of probably down play from this team, if I had to guess. But
Agreed.
That being said, I hold firm. I'm really a big fan of the level of talent they've assembled here, which really just speaks to why Joe Barry needs to go, because you have all of this and you're getting nothing done with it. And that's the thing, right? Devontae Wyatt, I mean, he really is one of the most strong at the point of attack, young defensive tackles in the league. He was sort of the running mate of that touted Georgia defense with Jordan Davis for a period of time, as well as obviously Jalen Carter. But Wyatt actually himself managed to stand out quite a bit amongst that team, and for good reason. He's highly talented, high caliber player. Same with Kenny Clark. I mean, Kenny Clark's been a borderline All-Pro his entire career. Preston Smith, although advanced age, brings you a borderline Pro Bowl skill set as well. Mm-hmm. And again, I mean,
when Rashawn Gary's healthy, he's phenomenal as well.
They managed to re-sign Devondre Campbell after that breakout campaign a year prior, and he's in there as a mainstay alongside Quay Walker, who they decided to make a first-round pick. I wasn't the hugest fan of that decision, or maybe he was a second-rounder. I'm sorry, I can't remember which. Either way, a high pick player, but. Yeah. I wasn't the biggest fan of getting him where they did, but on the other hand, he's worthy of that selection from a talent standpoint. So I just find it a bit inexcusable. I'm talking about one in Rashawn Gary as well, who I already said I'm a big fan of. Yep. You're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 legit defensive starters now with Lucas Van Ness. I mean, if you can't stop the run with this unit consistently, and let alone get some pass rush,
it's not their fault.
It's not this team's fault, or at least it's not the personnel's fault to me. And I hate to scapegoat the guy that much, but I mean, it's I'm not saying anything the Packers fans don't already know. They want him out of there so bad. And I really, Packers fans, I can't tell you how many years I watched Ken Norton Jr. with Seattle and just begged and pleaded for him to get out of there. It's brutal, man. And defensive coordination and scheming is so important, because it requires so much discipline to play sound defensive, schemes like this that they want to play.
And when you have talent to this level, and something as what seems menial as just scheming to use the talent in the most effective way, becoming this thing where it just gets directly in the way of using your talent effectively, That's got to be incredibly frustrating, and I do feel for Packer fans in that regard.
Yes, imagine seeing all of your draft assets going toward improving this unit, and there's nothing but poor reward, like literally declining reward. Like they've gotten worse.
And you know they're good. You know
the talent's good, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, we can go a little further, talk about the secondary here. Jair Alexander's excellent player. He's going to continue to do his thing. Not really much to say there.
Yep.
Darnell Savage, I'm interested to see if he can turn it around now because he seems to be on his way out of town. He had a pretty solid first and somewhat okay second season, but he's kind of fallen off a bit in level of play and what they expected they were getting in him. So, prove me wrong, Darnell Savage. I love your game personally. I think you can get back to form, and hopefully that does happen for him because I'm a big fan of the player.
Agreed.
But outside of that, I mean, Rasul Douglas, going to be in there. The elder statesman kind of taking up nickel stuff. Not a whole lot. Not doing much for me there. Decent player, but nothing special. Eric Stokes will be returning off of a major injury. He was prolific with his early returns as a young player. Eric Stokes, very rangy, very, very tall. Fits the category for sort of what you want in a corner that's going to play as much outside, like cover 3 scheme stuff that they like to do. They like to mix it up a bit, but I like him as a complement to Jair Alexander. I'm interested to see if they come back together and form a formidable corner duo. That could be huge for this defense if that's the
100%.
case. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else to say. I guess maybe the last thing I could throw out there is Anthony Johnson, the safety out of Iowa State in round 7. I like that as a flyer. I think he was a guy that fell. Probably shouldn't have been around that spot. So maybe he's another development that they think about behind Darnell Savage if they do indeed decide to move on from him.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Just it's another one of those teams. I almost get a little bit of Raiders vibes from our discussion with this team. It's like we don't know what to say. You know, I don't think there's much high expectation for the roster, but I do like the talent level on this side of the ball.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, right, like, we really just don't know what this team is going to look like until we can see Jordan Love get out there and play. You know, who's to say? You know, we could see him get out there and he turns out to be like just a generational talent that was sitting behind another generational talent for a long time, or he could get out there and really, really struggle. We just don't know. He's had one career NFL start, and until we get some more sample size out of him, I just don't think we can understand what this team is going to want to do schematically on the defensive side of the ball, just because it's going to be hard to know what they're going to be looking at, you know, what sort of situations they're going to be facing. But I just hope for Bears fans that the tide can finally turn and Aaron Rodgers and the Packers no longer own you, and it's not going to be another 10 or 15 years of that.
Oh man. Yeah. Feeling for the Bears fans out there. But
yeah, you know, I think it's that time of the episode where we get down to our picks to win the division. I am going to go out on a limb here that is not a super unpopular limb to be out on these days, but give me not the Vikings. No, I'm not taking the Vikings. Give me the Lions. No. Give me the Lions. I think that what they've been able to do the last couple of years under the helm of Dan Campbell and what they were able to do on offense, and I think that of all of these defenses that have been struggling in the NFC North, I think theirs is in the position to be most poised to improve, at least improve the most in this division. And I think that as long as they don't get out to that 1-6 start, they're going to have a very, very good season. As far as the people that are calling it out to say that they are going to be one of the contenders for the 1 seed in the NFC, I don't know that I'd go that far. I do think that they have the potential to make a deep playoff run. I don't know whether or not they're going to secure the 1st seed or not, but I love the roster. I love the culture that Dan Campbell's building, and their defense I think is going to be the most improved. So yeah, give me the Lions. Yeah,
no opposition to that from my side. I'm going to go real chalk again here and go with the Lions. Again, I just want to reiterate, I do have a little bit of concerns about their offense just from the Pure being nearly as explosive as they were prior season, but I think that's completely offset by the expectations I have for the defense in this coming year. I think this defense is going to turn around and be at least a potentially top 15 unit.
Agreed.
Which would be a tremendous turnaround from 32 to that. But I think it's very well possible. I mean, if I had to go conservative, I'd say at least top 20. Like, I really couldn't see otherwise. Just the talent level is too high. And they made a lot of additions. So, I mean, that's kind of what you'd expect. That's what they'd expect, at least. But I will say, give the Minnesota Vikings their flowers. I think they're going to be able to chase that lead quite a bit.
It'll be competitive.
Yeah, it will be competitive. I think this is the kind of division where you're going to see pretty much every divisional 2 games get split between almost every team that plays itself. Like, I could very well see the Packers getting a game off the Lions this year, as much as I could see the Bears getting a game off the Vikings and everybody else. Like, I think this whole division could split a bunch. But at the end of the day, in terms of just record chasing and trying to secure the division win, I do have to at least give the Vikings a nod in terms of I think it's possible that they could be a dark horse here and take it. And what would be the the thing leading to that being the case? I'd say if my concerns about the Lions offense ring true and they can't replicate their performance prior and I'm overestimating the defense, then, well, the Vikings are in a position to where they're going to improve as well. It's without a doubt they've done some things to improve. As low as I am on the defense, that doesn't change the fact that they're going to have Justin Jefferson out there, and Jordan Addison, I really do believe can have a huge first year in this league. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun division to watch. A lot of turnover, a lot of new faces. So, glad to have gone over everything with you, man. It's been fun.
Yeah, agreed. We've been really cooking through these. We only have 3 left, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Only 3 more of these divisional breakdowns
fun,
left.
Man. I swear, like, every single episode feels like it goes faster. Like, we're already here today.
Right? I know. Yeah, so, only got 3 more left. I'm looking forward to the next 3. I think they're going to be a really fun 3. We've got both of our teams upcoming here still. So I'm excited to get to those.
We haven't even talked about them.
I know,
I'm excited to be in
the
NFC, man. This is a very interesting division with the lack of like quarterback talent at the top, like we're saying, the echelon, you know.
Agreed. As always, Spencer, it was a great joy to be able to talk some ball with you, and to all of our Rumblers out there, we will be back with the NFC South for the next episode. We have officially launched on our YouTube channel. Make sure to go to all of our socials at RumberPod. Go to check out the YouTube channel, leave a like and subscribe. And if you have anything pressing, if you want to try to clown on us or you want to sing our praises, shoot us a DM, and we can chat. But as always, Spencer, it was a joy, and hope you have a good rest of your week.